again, and welcome all of you that didn't watch my presentation yesterday. Today I'm going to talk about a little bit more in depth about underwater photography and technical underwater photography, which I do a lot. I participated in World Championship in underwater photography in 2005 and didn't do well at all. I was shooting macro and I was shooting wide angle, and it was a huge challenge for me because A, I'm nervous in competitions, and B, macro, I didn't even know much about macro, but you had to do it to be able to play somehow. After that competition, I decided that macro is not for me, so I sold my macro lens. I removed my strobes from my camera. So in 2008, when Nikon released the D3, I decided, now the cameras are good enough for what I want to do. This is what I've been dreaming on for the past 15 years. This is what I want to do. ISOs were good enough to shoot in ambient light, even in the Baltic Sea. So I started with working with off-camera lights, like you can see in this picture. This is the wreck of Hispania outside Stockholm, where I have no lights on the camera. This is 45 meters deep, probably in May. It's pitch black to the eye, and I just have a light on the model. But I was also like, there's so much to do to get the really, really good images, because the models tend to be close to the wrecks, and you see how they burn out the close part because the light is too close to the wreck. So I was like, I need to do some kind of change in this. Here's the clicker. So big button. Oh yeah. Okay. So a few years later, I took Frederick to the Red Sea on a liveaboard, and we had dove quite a bit more than the other diver, and we had one of these fantastic morning dives on our rebreathers at the Thistlegorm. We jumped in the water at 4:30 in the morning or something. We were alone on the wreck on the rebreathers for about 60 to 90 minutes before the bubble makers came to the wreck. So we spent about an hour in the machine rooms on our rebreathers, and we took these kind of images. This is also with just one or two continuous lights from Big Blue dive lights that we lit up inside the cargo hold. And for me, I'm not using any light from the camera in this case either. I'm on very high ISO. I'm on a very slow shutter speed or long shutter speed. As you can see, there's a lot of ambient light still coming in, even though it's like 6 in the morning. And this is at 30 meters depth, like 3 or 4 stories down in a cargo hold. But I wanted to take it further. So now we're scrolling back because that was 2019, but this is 2016 in Gulen, where I had an idea of I wanted to create something that I saw on a Christmas concert in December 2015. I was on this beautiful music show on a beautiful theater in Stockholm, and I was like, this light that they have on stage, I love it. I want to move this and use this underwater. And it was a top light like this. But how do you do that on wrecks? So I was thinking, I was like, yeah, but what about cave line? If we put cave line and we put a lot of floaters, so I tried all kinds of floaters and we attached it to the lights, and then each diver would deploy a little selfie light from themselves when they got down. And that's what we did here. The first times we tried, we had like these uncompressible foam that they use for house building and stuff. At 40 meters, it turned into pinball, basically. So it was not floating. But here we found other things that definitely floated at 40, 45 meters, and we could start creating this light. So this is the first ever dive when I used what I named selfie lights. I continued using this technique a lot in Norway for the next few years because I wanted to develop it before I started talking about it or showing it to other people. This is at Ferndale Parat, also in Gulen Dive Center. Ferndale goes down to about 40 meters, and Parat is, the bottom of the Parat is around 63 meters. And this is in February, so there's very low light or almost no ambient light. In 2020, I got certified in overhead environment, even though I already tried it in 1993 without lines and stuff. But this is the proper way. You get proper training, you learn the right way. And on the first dive after the course, I took this image and I took this image on one dive. And I was in love with the mine diving because it was beautiful. You could just place the lights. They would get stuck in the ceiling of the caves or in the mines. We worked with a little bit of underlight in the workplace in Tunahästberg. We worked also with the reflection of the mirrored air pocket, which is very convenient when you're a rebreather and there is no bubbles coming out. And we found other cool places in the mine to shoot. The far left image for you is called the drop-off. So the top of the drop-off is around 18 meters in the ceiling. The bottom you see is around 42 meters. So it's a pretty big space. To do this kind of dives, of course, there's a lot of gear. We usually work with DPVs especially for me, because I need to move around a lot. The models doesn't necessarily have to have DPVs, but I need to be, because 1 second I need to be there, and then I'm like, no, this will look much better from that corner, 50 meters over there. So then I use the DPV to transport myself to that position to take the image. And of course, rebreather, I'm diving the Divesoft Liberty side mount, which is very convenient. And I also have a stabilizer it works a little bit like a gimbal for the DPVs. And these are my Big Blue 65,000 lights and with floaters that I've kind of built myself with duct tape and other parts. And the floaters are also from Big Blue dive lights. So this is kind of what I use on the dives that I do. Here's one of the images that we have in the gallery. It's from the Blue Abyss in Mexico. This is my favorite place to photograph because it's one of the larger rooms in Mexico. This time we went from Pet Cemetery, which is about a 60-minute swim through a restriction called tank off, tank on. So you kind of have to take off some of your stages to get through a small hole and then push through to come into this place, which is about 60 minutes in. Then there's another bypass way, which takes around 70 minutes to Pet Cemetery. But the coolest way is to go from Nahoch with scooters. That takes around 70 minutes also with the DPV. If you would have to swim, it would of course take a few hours. And that's a really beautiful power cave. I will show you some footage from that cave later, I think. And I just like big spaces because I come from a background as a studio photographer. I was shooting commercials for 15 years for a clothing brand H&M. And I kind of wanted to implement my techniques from the studio into the underwater world. Because what I noticed is that in the beginning of underwater photography, people were just illuminating subjects. But in a studio, you don't just illuminate, you actually set a mood, you set a feeling with lights by working with different angles. You might use blackout shields to control the light. How do you want the feeling of the image and the impact to be? Here's a more recent image from the Nixie expedition in Bhutan in October last year. Very, very beautiful cave. Not much to say about that, but we used one light backlit on the diver, as you can see. There's one light hidden up here behind the shelf, so we don't get the direct beam from the light, because you don't want the hotspot of the light visible in the image. I used another light far, far down in the cave on the right side also. And I think it creates a pretty good, large underwater scene. I think of it as landscape photography underwater. And I prefer to have a diver always in every image because it gives a sense of size so people can understand like how big these spaces are. And this is about close to 2 kilometers into the cave. So, nice DPV dive. Here's a video from Mexico, just from Tacbeja. The dive site is actually called LSD. You will understand that later when you see the video. Here you can see that the fresh water and salt water is mixing at a certain depth, and it creates this like waves when the waters are mixing, and that's why the name of the cave is called LSD. Because when you get into that blur, you see nothing. Like aeroplane trails. Now we're in the salt water, which is more blue. Still no lights on my camera. Thank you. So to go back to that video, I wanted to start with video also many years ago, but the cameras were not where I felt I couldn't create my still image feeling. I've heard many times in the past 5-10 years that, oh, I can recognize that's an Alex Dawson image. And I wanted to kind of create that kind of feeling in video too. And I tried different cameras, different techniques, and I couldn't figure it out until Nikon released the Z9. That's when I finally figured out, which shoots raw video. And with that camera, I could start creating and getting the same feeling also to motion picture as I had into my still images. So then I was like, okay, I'm ready to start releasing videos. Unfortunately, I haven't dove enough in the past 2-3 years, so I haven't created that much, but there's gonna be another video a little bit later. But I also wanna talk about mistakes in underwater photography. So this is the stern of Southwold, HMS Southwold in Malta at 72 meters. It's a beautiful angle, everything is correct. The biggest problem here is that the communication between me and might be Frederick in the picture, is that he's not facing the camera, he's swimming away in the picture. This is due to probably that we were lacking, I didn't do proper briefing prior to like how we were gonna shoot. It was a fun trip. I like to not make every fun trip with my friends into photography session where they're working, but in hindsight I wish that Fredrik would have turned around, but he can't read my mind, not yet, but in the future maybe. Or I was in the wrong place. No, because the bow is, the stern is intact and then it's exploded. Here's another good example on how not to do it. This is in Vis, Croatia. It's the B-17 bomber at 72 meters. I'm there for a Dive Soft Liberty event, and we're like 14 rebreather divers, and everybody wants to jump in immediately. This is a really bad plan if you want to take good pictures, because it's just too many divers. It can never look good with this many divers in the picture at the same time. And yeah, so in hindsight, I should have sat at the boat for 20 minutes and just jumped in with my models last. These people would be gone after 20 minutes because they're already going up for deco. And we would have had the wreck to ourselves. So planning is essential, and it's not my strongest part, but I'm trying to get better. I'm hoping I can get better. This is how a well-planned and executed dive is. This is the Laura in the Red Sea. I did a good briefing for my dive buddies, Terje Sletnes from Norway and Florian Simmons from Belgium, and they listened to also what I said. And the dynamic in this image, the connection between the divers and the wreck is really, really good. I mean, Florian is looking at the wreck, putting the light at the wreck. Same thing with Terje. They're both facing inwards to the image. You really don't want divers diving. Let's say that Terje was on the outside of the mast and then shining the light on the reef where it looks like he's traveling out of the image. That's never pleasing to the eye. So this, in my opinion, is much more pleasing and a much more nice way to have a wreck image. And it's a personal preference always also, but I definitely prefer divers swimming into the image, not leaving the image. And that's about it, besides this last little video, which is also from Mexico. It's shot in a place called Yab Yam, which is the biggest sinkhole known to man underground, or that I know of anyway. It's almost 100 meters by 100 meters in dimension. And the bottom, the stalagmites at the bottom, some of them are like, I think one of them is like almost 20 meters high. They're ridiculously big. And it's a huge space, goes down to 70 meters in one end. This was the second dive at this dive site, so we had decided that we're gonna just put one large ceiling light, and then each of them had a video light each, and we had a rough plan of how they were gonna swim. So both of these videos are both shot in one dive, on the fly. Divers up in the corner, I don't know if you saw. Thank you so much for watching. This was a little insight.